Hey, my lore-loving weirdos. Welcome back to Loreplay. I'm Dayna Pereira, proving once again that I cannot stop researching things that make me question the entire history of the justice system. If ever there was a woman that was a glutton for punishment, it's me. And obviously you too, because you keep coming back to this shit show. This week, I encourage you to grab a drink. Seriously, get a strong one. Doesn't even have to be alcohol. Just steep that tea for an extra few minutes. Not because tonight's story is so scary that you're going to need liquid courage or comfort, although honestly some of it is, but because once I tell you how many people were executed in France alone for allegedly turning into wolves, you're going to want something to hold on to. Tonight, we are talking about the werewolf trials. And I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, Dayna, werewolves are fake. Werewolves are movie monsters. Werewolves are the thing you dressed as when you were 8 and your mom sewed a tail onto your jeans. And yes, friend, you are absolutely correct. Werewolves are not real. But here's the thing. For a stretch of roughly 200-ish years, between the 1400s and the 1700s, a significant portion of Europe genuinely, sincerely bet your life on it believed that they were. And the people in charge, the judges, the inquisitors, the learned men with their Latin and their legal degrees and their absolute conviction that they knew better than everyone else, they believed it too. And when powerful people believe something with their whole chest, even something that is objectively completely fucking wrong, people die. A lot of people. We're talking tens of thousands. And that's the story we're telling tonight. Not just the monsters, but the machine. The fear, the trials, the torture, and the truly unhinged confessions. So, picture this. It's the year 1450, give or take. You're a peasant in rural Europe. Let's say France or Germany or Switzerland. Somewhere where the winters are long and genuinely trying to kill you. The forest starts approximately 12 feet from your back door, and there are actual real live wolves out there in the dark. Now, I want to pause on that for a second because in our modern world, wolves are this romantic, misunderstood creature that we put on t-shirts or memes with some inspirational quote. In medieval Europe, wolves were a legitimate existential threat. They took livestock. They took children. They came out of the forest in packs during the winter when food was scarce, and they did not give a shit about your feelings. People who lived in this era had a visceral, inherited, generational terror of wolves that we simply just do not have today. And I think that's important for understanding everything that comes next. Now, pile on top of your wolf anxiety the following. The Catholic Church, which has enormous power and is extremely invested in the idea that the devil is a real and present force who actively recruits humans to do its bidding. Throw in the Protestant Reformation, starting in the early 1500s, which means Catholics and Protestants are now at each other's throats across the continent, and religious paranoia is at an absolute fever pitch. Add a stretch of brutal cold snaps that historians call the Little Ice Age, which tanked harvests and made food shortages routine. Stir in the printing press, which was invented around 1440, and which could now spread terrifying stories to literate audiences faster than ever before in human history. Now, sprinkle in some genuine serial killers and child murderers whose crimes got attributed to supernatural causes because people didn't have the framework of psychopathy or mental illness to explain what they were seeing. And now ask yourself, under these conditions, If children start going missing near your village, and witnesses report seeing something large and dark and wolf-shaped, what do you reach for as an explanation? A regular wolf? Boring. A serial killer? Well, they didn't have that word yet. A man who made a deal with the devil and turns into a wolf on the weekends? Now we're talking. Very satisfying. Wrong, but satisfying. Anyone else seeing the pattern across these stories? Of course you are, because you're smart. This is the world that produced the werewolf trials. And once the machine started up, it ran for roughly 250 years. The earliest documented accusations of lycanthropy, that's the technical word for the condition of becoming a wolf, show up in the mid-1400s in what is now Switzerland. A Swiss chronicler made note of accusations that certain individuals could transform into wolves. From Switzerland, the belief, and the trials, spread outward like a very dark, very legally consequential ripple into France, into Germany, into the Low Countries and the Baltic regions. And it peaked, like absolutely peaked, in the late 16th and early 17th centuries, when the combination of religious war, economic desperation, and the widespread circulation of sensationalist pamphlets created a perfect storm of superstition and judicial terror. It's been estimated that in France alone, between 1520 and 1630, upwards of 30,000 people were executed with accusations of lycanthropy somewhere in the mix. Now, granted, that's also including witch trials, but 30,000 for witches and werewolves? That's more than the entire population of some medieval cities. And that's just France. That's not counting Germany, Switzerland, or the Baltic regions, where werewolf trials were, at certain points, the most common form of witchcraft accusation going. All because of fear and politics and the absolute willingness of people in power to torture confessions out of people until they said whatever was needed to justify an execution. Now, let's talk about some of those people, because the werewolf trials were not abstract. They had faces. They had names. And their stories are equal parts terrifying, grotesque, tragic, and, in at least one remarkable case, genuinely kind of hilarious, in the darkest way imaginable. Our first stop is France. The year is 1573. The location is Dole, a town in the eastern French region. At the time, a semi-autonomous area under the jurisdiction of the Spanish crown. Deeply Catholic, deeply anxious, and very much in the middle of a period of religious tension that had already culminated in the St. Bartholomew's Day massacre. And Dole has a problem. Children are going missing. Over the course of the late summer and the early autumn of 1572 and into 1573, multiple children from the area vanish or are found mutilated in the woods. The town is understandably beside itself. Wolves are blamed. Search parties are organized. And the Parliament of Dole does something that is either the most reasonable or the most unhinged thing they could have done, depending on your perspective. They issue an official decree authorizing citizens to hunt werewolves. Now, I'll say that again. An official government document authorizing the hunting of werewolves. The decree stated that because a werewolf had been seen lurking in the area and attacking children, the people of Dole were hereby legally permitted to assemble and kill said werewolf. This was a legal hunting license for a werewolf. issued by an actual court. Armed with their weapons and their conviction, a group of townspeople are out on patrol one November evening when they hear screaming. They find a wolf, or something wolf-shaped, attacking a 12-year-old girl. They chase it off, and according to several witnesses, as it fled, it looked less like a wolf and more like a particular local hermit named Gilles Garnier. Now, Gilles was the exact kind of person who attracted suspicion in early modern Europe. He was poor. He lived outside the town in the forest. He was described as pale, deformed, and melancholy. He had recently immigrated to the area and was having trouble feeding himself and his wife. A week after the attack on the girl, another child goes missing. And that's when the authorities come for Gilles. What happened next follows a pattern you're going to see repeated a lot in these trials. He was arrested, he was tortured, and under torture, he confessed. His confession was creative. He admitted to killing 4 children. He said a specter appeared to him and said it would help ease his struggles and gave him an ointment to turn him into a wolf. He then said that he had hunted children and had torn them apart and eaten their flesh, and that he had brought pieces home to share with his wife, which I don't know what's more disturbing, the bringing home or the sharing. Like, that's a level of domestic partnership I was not prepared for today. On one occasion, a Friday, naturally, Gilles killed a boy and was about to eat the body when a group of people happened to walk by and interrupted him. He had to flee before he could finish. The court made very sure to note in the record that it was a Friday. The double sacrilege of murder and eating meat on a Friday? Straight to hell. There were reportedly 50 witnesses who testified against him. The court didn't really need the werewolf angle to convict him of murder. The evidence for that was apparently substantial. But lycanthropy and witchcraft were added to the charges because that was the framework available for explaining what he'd done. He was obviously found guilty and burned at the stake. Now, was he likely a piece of shit that hunted children and deserved to be burned at the stake? Yes. But did he shapeshift into a wolf after drinking a magic potion peddled to him by a ghost? Probably not. 99% sure. Now, let's take a trip to Germany. The most famous German one belongs to a man variously known as Peter Stumpp, Peter Stubb, or Peter Stumpf. The spelling varies depending on which historical document you're consulting. And honestly, the inconsistency feels very on brand for a 16th century horror pamphlet. We're going to go with Stumpp because it's the easiest. He was arrested in 1589. He was reportedly a wealthy and respected local farmer, which makes him unusual among the accused, who were more often outcasts or marginal figures. He was also, depending on which historian you ask, either a Protestant in a suddenly very dangerous for Protestants region, or someone with genuine enemies in the local power structure who were very motivated to see him destroyed. What we know about his case comes almost entirely from a single source, a pamphlet published in London in 1590, a year after his execution, titled, and I am going to read this in full because it is spectacular, "A true discourse declaring the damnable life and death of one Stub Peter, a most wicked sorcerer, who in the likeness of a wolf committed many murders, continuing this devilish practice 25 years, killing and devouring men, women, and children. That is quite a title. This pamphlet is the primary historical record of Stumpp's trial. There are no surviving court documents. We have this pamphlet, and we have a woodcut that accompanied it, which depicts Stumpp's execution in such spectacular and graphic detail that it's been used as a reference point by historians ever since. So, what did the pamphlet claim? According to the pamphlet, Peter Stumpp had made a deal with the devil at the age of 12. In exchange for this deal, the devil gave him a girdle or a belt, which, when he put it on, transformed him into a wolf. When he took it off, he transformed back. He allegedly used this belt to commit 25 years of murders. And when authorities eventually caught him, through the very cinematic method of releasing the hounds to find him, they searched for the belt, and they never found it. The pamphlet explained this by saying that the devil had come and taken the belt back to hell. I mean, sure, why not? And once again, we get a confession. How lucky! The confession Stumpp gave, almost certainly under extreme torture, though the pamphlet kind of, glosses over this part with the phrase being forced, was extraordinary, even by the standards of the era. He confessed to murders including 14 children and 2 pregnant women whose fetuses he ripped from their wombs and ate their hearts, panting hot and raw. He confessed to cannibalism. He confessed to sleeping with a succubus sent by the devil. He confessed to incest with his daughter and to having a mistress. He confessed to eating the brain of his own son. The execution that followed was brutal. Stumpp was placed on a wheel. Flesh was torn from his body with burning pincers. His limbs were broken with the blunt side of an axe. He was beheaded. His body was burned. And his daughter and his mistress, who had also been arrested, were flayed, strangled, and burned alongside of him. And as a final flourish, a wheel was erected on a pole with a sculpted wolf on it, and Stumpp's actual severed head was placed on top as a warning. This is not normal even for the era. This execution was designed to be theatrical. It was designed to be remembered. And it was, because the pamphlet spread across Europe and England, one of the defining accounts of what a werewolf actually was. For generations after Peter Stumpp, the template for a European werewolf, devil's bargain, magical belt, shape-shifting, murder, cannibalism, come largely from this pamphlet about this one man and this one theatrical trial. The pamphlet went everywhere. It was translated. It was reprinted. It was read aloud in markets and taverns. And every time it was consumed, it reinforced the idea that werewolves were real, that they made deals with the devil, and that they deserved spectacular deaths. The printing press didn't just spread the news, it spread the template. And the template made more trials more likely. Pamphlets were essentially medieval social media. Not as fast as today, but still useful in spreading misinformation and fear in a horrifying way. So now it's 1598. France is apparently having a banner year for lycanthropy, and the Gandillon family is about to have the absolute worst spring of their collective lives. It starts with Père Net Gandillon. a young woman who was already known locally for running around on all fours in the belief that she was a wolf. Now, let's take that in for a minute. The locals knew this. It was an established fact about her in the village. And yet, no intervention, no support, just, oh, that's Pernette. Kooky thing, she thinks she's a wolf sometimes. Anyways, harvest looks good this year. I mean, it was different times. One day in the spring of 1598, a 15-year-old boy named Benoit climbs a tree to pick fruit. His sister is below him. A wolf-like creature emerges from the bushes and goes for her. Now, Benoit drops from the tree to defend her, drawing his knife. The creature struck his knife away, and Benoit was fatally wounded. His sister died at the scene, and before Benoit himself died of his injuries a few days later, he told anyone that would listen, the wolf had hands. Human hands. The creature had been injured during the struggle, and suspicion immediately fell on Pernette, who was found nearby, covered in blood and scratches, with a wound in exactly the place the creature had been hurt. She was immediately seized by a mob and torn to pieces. No arrest, no trial, no questions. Just mob justice on the spot from her own neighbors, with every potential that she was a victim too of an animal attack, but okay. Following Pernette's mob murder, 3 family members were arrested. Her brother, Pierre, her sister, Antoinette, and Pierre's son, Georges. Their interrogation was supervised by Henry Boguet, Grand Judge of the area, and a man who had, by his own account, sentenced over 600 people for witchcraft and werewolfery over his career. 600! He had written the book on it, literally. He published something in 1602. This man was not going into that jail cell looking for innocent people. Under torture, the family confessed. Antoinette admitted to being a werewolf, sleeping with the devil who had appeared to her in the form of a goat, which, as a detail, is absolutely fucked. Now, I don't want to put the image in your head of some girl getting fucked by a red-eyed goat, but I've had to suffer with that image through multiple drafts of this episode, so solidarity, we suffer together. Pierre confessed that the devil had given his family magical wolfskins that transformed them. Georges said that he had an ointment that did the same thing, and that he had killed 2 goats while in wolf form. I mean, 2 goats, Georges? The bar was on the floor. Antoinette confessed to sleeping with a satanic barnyard animal, and Georges comes in with, I killed 2 goats? That's amateur energy. But here is the part historians have wrestled with for 400 years. When Boguet visited the family in their cells, he found them walking on all fours, howling, their faces, hands, and legs covered in scratches. Pierre, he wrote, bore hardly any resemblance to a man and struck all those who looked at him with horror. Eyes red, hair seemingly sprouted, nails curved like claws. Now, what was actually happening? The most credible modern explanation is severe mental illness, possibly clinical lycanthropy, which is a real and documented condition in which a person believes they are transforming into an animal. It can accompany psychosis. It can be induced or worsened by extreme stress. Pernette, based on her behavior before any of this started, was very likely already unwell, or may have broken down entirely under the weight of what was happening to them. Boguet, who needed to see werewolves, saw werewolves. The family's behavior in their cells was proof enough for him, and he sentenced all three to death. They were burned at the stake. A family that almost certainly included members experiencing genuine mental illness was destroyed by a man whose entire professional identity depended on him prosecuting werewolves. Wild. And not a single person was like, hey guys, this feels like a little far-fetched. Pun intended. In the same year, 1598, which I'm telling you, France should have just called it at that point, Jacques Roulet was having his own encounter with the justice system. Roulet was found in the woods by a group of hunters who had been following two wolves feeding on the mutilated body of a 15-year-old boy. They chased the wolves into the trees. What they found instead, crouched in the bushes, was a gaunt, half-naked man with long matted hair, hands soaked in blood, and what the examining physician confirmed was human flesh under his fingernails. He was taken in for questioning, and unlike most people in these cases, Roulet confessed relatively quickly, with, sources note, some evidence of torture, but also with a kind of exhausted willingness that reads less like performance and more like relief. He said his parents had given him a salve that transformed him into a wolf. As a wolf, he had killed the boy. His brother and cousin were also werewolves, he said. They hunted together. He had done this before. He had killed other children. The local court convicted him of murder, lycanthropy, and cannibalism, and sentenced him to death. But then something happened that almost never happens. The case went up on appeal to the Parliament of Paris, and the Parliament of Paris actually stopped and looked at Jacques Roulet. What they saw was a man who was, in the court's records phrasing, more fool than fiend, someone whose poverty had essentially destroyed his mind. He was malnourished to the point of being unrecognizable as healthy. He had, while imprisoned, drunk an entire pail of water and then refused to eat or drink anything for days. His confession was full of contradictions. His brother and cousin, when investigated, turned out to have been miles away at the time of the crimes. The Parliament of Paris commuted the death sentence. Instead of execution, Roulet was sent to an asylum in Paris for 2 years. Again, he almost certainly committed the murder, but the higher court looked at him and said, "This is not a man who made a pact with the devil. This is a man whose mind has been broken." And those are different things. This was not normal. This was not common. The Roulet case matters because it was a crack in the machine. A moment when an educated, somewhat skeptical judge looked at the template and said, "I don't think this fits." It pointed toward something that was starting to shift, slowly, in how educated Europeans thought about these cases. The shift would take another century to fully arrive, but it was coming. Now, I want to take a brief detour, I promise it's worth it, to 1764, because there is a case from this era that I think perfectly illustrates what was actually driving all of this fear and what changes when the fear loses its institutional backing. We're in South Central France. Something is killing people. Over roughly 3 years, something large, fast, and ferocious kills somewhere between 60 and 100 people, mostly women and children. The attacks are catastrophically violent. Survivors describe a creature enormous for a wolf, with reddish fur and an almost human cunning. It targets the throat and it strikes at dusk and dawn. King Louis XV sends professional wolf hunters. Tens of thousands of wolves are killed across the region. None of them are the beast. The press covers it obsessively. Pamphlets circulate. There are serious discussions of whether it's supernatural, whether it's a werewolf. Eventually, in June 1767, a local hunter shoots a large wolf, and the attacks stop. No devil's contract, no magical belt, just an unusually large, unusually bold wolf, or possibly several, exploiting a rural population that couldn't adequately defend itself. Now, here's what's interesting. This happened almost a century after the peak of the trials, and the response was categorically different. The authorities looked for a natural explanation from the start. They hunted actual wolves. When one wolf ended the attacks, they accepted that answer and moved on. That's a huge difference between there is a wolf killing people, we should hunt it, and there is a wolf killing people, someone must have made a deal with the devil. I mean, that shift is enormous. Okay, so let's do one more fun one. An 80-year-old man known as Thiess of Keltenbrunn, or Old Thiess for obvious reasons, is brought before the court as a witness in a church robbery case. The judges know he has a local reputation as a werewolf, but by this point, even Baltic courts are skeptical of supernatural claims. They don't give a shit. They just want his testimony about the robbery. And then Old Thiess opens his mouth. He tells the court, yes, he is a werewolf. He has been one for many years, although he is recently retired. He is 80, after all. And I love this so much. As if being a werewolf is something you can retire from. Like, oh, yeah, I was a werewolf for 30 years, but, knees aren't what they used to be. That's truly the energy that I want to bring into my 80s. Then he says he would like to explain what being a werewolf actually means. The judges, I imagine, exchange some extremely loaded looks. Thiess explains, 3 times a year, St. Lucia's night before Christmas, Pentecost, and St. John's Eve, he and a company of other werewolves transform and journey to hell. Not to cause trouble there, to cause trouble for the people already there. Witches and sorcerers, Thiess explains, the bad kind of magical people, the ones working for the devil. They steal grain and livestock from local farmers and carry them down to hell, ruining the harvest. The werewolves go to hell specifically to fight these witches with iron whips and take the stolen goods back. Sometimes the witches win and the crops fail. Sometimes the werewolves win and there's bread on the table. The werewolves are, and this is Thiess's own word for it, the hounds of God. The judges, understandably, are not following. They ask Thiess to clarify where he stands on the devil, and Thiess says he hates the devil. The devil is the enemy. That is who they are fighting. The judges are like, surely your powers come from a pact with Satan. And Thiess says, absolutely not. He became a werewolf because someone handed him a drink and a toast and passed the power along. Completely normal. And then he says he could do the same for someone else if they were interested. If they were interested. Casually offering to make judges werewolves. The audacity of this man. I think I might be obsessed with him. He's like someone's unhinged grandpa at Christmas dinner who's just decided, you know what, this year I'm going to be a problem. So now the judges want to know, where do werewolves go when they die? To heaven, obviously. They have been fighting for God. Why would they go anywhere else? And according to the historical record, this answer shakes the judges. Because this is not how werewolf theology works. Everyone knows werewolves serve the devil. It's in the books. It's in the confessions extracted over 200 years of trials. And then here's this old man, untortured, unconfined, entirely lucid, cheerful, saying, no, you've got it completely wrong. We're the good guys. Which kind of sounds like something the bad guys would say, honestly. The parish priest was summoned, and he told Thiess that he was being deceived by the devil and needed to confess his actual sins. But Thiess said he had no actual sins to confess. The priest said he was in grave spiritual peril. And Thiess was, by all accounts, genuinely unbothered. The court, unable to extract anything demonic from him and unwilling to simply let him go, convicted him of harboring diabolical delusions, quite possibly the mildest werewolf verdict in European history, and sentenced him to 20 lashes and banishment for life. So 20 lashes, and then they just sent him away. Compare that to Peter Stumpp with his flesh torn from his body with hot pincers, bones broken on a wheel, beheaded, burning, head mounted on a pole. Compare it to Gilles and the Gandillons, burned at the stake. 20 lashes was a cakewalk, although arguably still horrible. He sat in that courtroom and looked at the judges who had inherited 200 years of templates and pamphlets and insisted on how the supernatural was supposed to work. And he said, no, actually, you've got that wrong. Let me tell you how it really goes. And they couldn't quite burn him for that. I mean, not quite. I truly might be crushing on this man. 80 years old, 20 lashes pending, priest in his face, judges losing their minds, and old Thiess is just like, I said what I said. I mean, iconic. By the early 1700s, the trials were ending. The scientific revolution had done its slow work. Legal reforms in several jurisdictions restricted the use of torture. And without torture, the confessions dried up or stopped coming altogether. The real wolves were retreating as Europe's forests were cleared and its population grew. The last major werewolf trial in Western Europe occurred in the early 1700s. After that, the machine fell silent. The werewolf didn't die. It migrated into Gothic novels, penny dreadfuls, Universal Pictures, Teen Wolf, your favorite fantasy series. And now I want to push back on the easy interpretation of all of this, because the easy interpretation is that people back then were stupid and superstitious and killed each other over nonsense. And although that tracks, that isn't true for the time. You know that saying, like, you do the best you can with what you have, and when you know better, you do better, or something like that? The people who ran these trials were not idiots. They lived in a world with real wolves, where children genuinely died in the woods, where mental illness had no name and serial killers had no category. The church was the only explanatory apparatus for anything bad that happened, and the devil was as real as the weather. When they found someone who confessed to being a wolf, under torture usually, but not always, they used the tools they had. The tools were catastrophically, irreversibly wrong, but the people using them believed in them. What the werewolf trials are really about is the cost of certainty, the cost of a template you apply to every situation without asking whether it fits. Boguet and his colleagues were not asking what is actually happening here. They were asking, does this match what I already know? And because the template was backed by the full weight of church and state, it didn't matter that the template was wrong. And, I'll leave you to decide whether any of that sounds familiar. The other thing these trials are about is the people at the bottom of them. Giles, probably a disturbed man who killed children, handed a supernatural explanation that erased the actual human horror of what he'd done. The Gandillons, almost certainly mentally ill, destroyed by a system with no word for what they were experiencing. Jacques Roulet, who got lucky because one judge in Paris happened to look at him clearly, and old Thiess, who refused to cooperate with anyone's narrative, told his story the way he knew it and got beaten and exiled, but these were people, all of them, guilty, innocent, and everything in between, caught in a machine that was trying to make sense of the world in the only ways it knew how. That's the lore. That's always been the lore. Not the monsters, but the machine that made them. And damn, wasn't that a fucking doozy? I don't know about you guys, but the werewolf trials blow my mind. History coming in hot with some weird shit every week. Now, if you haven't already hit that subscribe button, what are you waiting for? And while you're there, just send to a friend or 12. And then, maybe hop over to the YouTube and subscribe there too. I know, lots of calls to action here. And until next time, remember, there once was a girl that confessed to getting fucked by a red-eyed goat. So, you're doing just fine.